Welcome back to Tuba People TV. We're here in beautiful McHenry, Illinois, with Mr. Will Scarlett, longtime trumpeter with the Chicago Symphony and a student of Mr. Jacobs. Thanks so much for having us out here.
My pleasure. I'll do anything I can do to keep his legacy alive is okay with me.
When did you first meet Mr. Jacobs?
Well, I went to Northwestern, and he was the tuba teacher there, but I did not study with him. In my fourth year of school, I won the audition to study with Herseth in the symphony with the civic orchestra, and I didn't get all that I wanted to get at Northwestern. I knew playing should be different, and so I went and studied that year with Herseth, and every serious brass student in those days around Chicago made a pilgrimage to Jacobs' studio. He was the guru of the breathing world. In fact, there were doctors, medical doctors, who went to him for advice about breathing. But I wanted to take my turn, so I spent the summer studying with him in 1956. And took notes on every lesson, wrote down everything as soon as the lesson was over. And so that's when I actually met him, although I had played several times with a number of times as an extra with the symphony while I was still in school.
Yeah.
Which is a big thrill, of course. But studying with him is something that we all had to do. And when he found out that I had a teacher who was a tight gut, known as a tight gut teacher, he had a lot of work to work on me.
To get you to relax.
Yes, to change my whole direction of playing. And that I knew that's what I wanted to get. And in fact, I'd had it earlier in high school and acquired some awful habits in college. But went to him after having studied with Bud. Bud was not the teacher to correct problems. He was the inspiration to make you play better just by hearing him play.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. That meant as much to me as Jake did in the physical side.
Sure.
Well, the fall of '56, I got drafted into the Army, which was customary in those days, and went to Germany and the 7th Army Symphony. And when I came back, I was able to come back as first trumpet at the Lyric Opera. But the next summer after that, I went back to Jake for the whole summer. Took notes and learned an awful lot. And he turned me around physically the way Herseth turned me around musically. So from that point on, Jake and I were good friends, and of course when I got in the orchestra, we just continued that.
Right.
And while we were both in the orchestra, which was about 25 years or so, there were many times when he and I would have long conversations in the locker room when they were rehearsing Mozart or something. And so it was like lessons all over again. You know, I might bring up a subject, and that would just open the door to all sorts of comments.
Yeah.
And in the end, of course, after he retired, I'd go over and visit him in the studio now and then, say hello, and it was always a fun time to get back together. And in his last year that he was alive, we were talking about sharing his studio. In other words, he would have it 2 or 3 days a week, and I would have it the other times.
Right.
Well, we hadn't quite settled on anything yet, and that's when he died. So, at that point, I took over his studio. And for the many years, he would often send me trumpet students. After he worked on them initially, he'd send them to me to continue the same process. I've been involved with Jake's ideas, for a good many years.
Yeah. Do you remember what was that he helped you the most with in terms of getting you to be not the tight gut application, but more of a relaxed? What was it that he told you or had you do or?
He used every kind of illustration he could think of, from just blowing out a candle or blowing on a pinwheel, or I can remember in my first lesson he put his hand on my leg and was making a motion like a violin bow. He said, "Now feel this. The trumpet playing is not hard like this. It's just light, and it's the same way in the breathing." Well, it's just one idea after another, like that. And collectively they caught on.
That's great. Mr. Scarlett, I'm wondering what, when you went to him the first time, it was at his house?
Yes, in the basement of that house over on, what was it, 8,000 South Normal or something in Chicago.
Okay, yeah.
It was a very interesting time. It was a very small house, and his studio was in the basement, and the studio was cluttered with tubas. I suspect he had 8 to 12 tubas down there, and I literally had to walk sideways to get through them to get to the student chair.
Mm-hmm. I've heard the stories.
And it was most interesting because he had so many gadgets and so many electronic this and that and all sorts of things. Of course, I didn't know what any of them would do, except I did see that Kahn strobo tuner there. But he had all sorts of other things too, and including the Spirometer, which I ended up with. But it was very enlightening, and I couldn't wait to get back the next week.
Well, certainly being down there and having all of that, all those gadgets and everything, it must have been very distracting as well as exciting. And I understand that from other people that there were Mr. Jacobs had in the basement various old appliances that didn't work anymore, like washers and dryers and that sort of thing. So it was filled with lots of memories and things.
Yeah. In the end, that old spirometer that he had, which was of course all mechanical, it broke, and he couldn't find anybody to fix it.
Yeah.
And I recently talked to somebody at the hospital and said that I had this spirometer. Oh, that should be in a museum. That's really unique.
That's the one that's in your
Yeah.
entryway. Oh, we'll definitely get a picture of that. Well, speaking of the spirometer, I remember Mr. Jacobs in one of my early lessons, so 81, 82, talking about you, and just the whole body somatotype mystery that came to him when you came in to his studio, and he had you. He measured your vital capacity because you're not tall in stature, but you're tall in vital capacity, and that was surprising to him. Can you recount that story?
Oh, that was a funny day. It was my first day there, and he had this mechanical spirometer, which you can take a picture of, and there's a cylinder that held water, and then there was another cylinder inverted that went into that, and a hose that went underneath and blew air up, and the inner cylinder, which was enclosed at the top, of course, the air would make that thing rise.
Yeah.
And then there was a dial, a paper, a paper graph, and it would show what your vital capacity was. And so he gave me all the preliminary instructions of well, you've got to take your absolutely maximum breath, and you've got to blow it into this hose, and we're going to see what happens. So I followed all the instructions as closely as I could, and so I blew it and blew into it, and that inner cylinder came right out of the water, and he was angry with me. He said, "You can't be fooling. This is serious. You can't be fooling around here." And
what did he think you were doing that was fooling around?
He couldn't figure out why, and but he thought I was playing games, and I didn't know. I wasn't. So it took him about 10 minutes to set this thing up again, to recalibrate it, and get the graph right and get the cylinder in the right place and all that stuff. So we did it again, and he gave me the same instructions, and this time he said, make sure your mouth is tight around that hose because you don't want any air coming in, extra air coming in, which is what he suspected I did.
Oh, Venturi.
Yeah, that I was blowing into this hose, but there was extra air coming along.
Yeah.
Well, we did the whole thing all over again, and the cylinder went up and up and up and up, came out exactly as it did the first time, and he looked at me, and in his usual jovial laugh, ho ho, he was almost like Santa Claus saying ho, but he said, "You're a freak." And from that point on, I guess he told that story many times.
Well, I mean, he certainly told it to me in one of my lessons, just about because you had. He said, "There's no way you should have that much air."
No.
But you have what, 6.8 or?
I actually went to I was measured at a hospital where they had a very fancy spirometer connected to a computer, and it was over 6.8 liters.
Wow.
And the printout came out that this patient has 148% of capacity, of normal capacity.
Yeah, because up to that point, it seemed like the graphs, the charts that Jake would reference were just on gender and age and height, or not. Yeah, but not somatotype.
Yeah.
Not body shape.
Yeah. Right.
And so that was new for him.
Yeah, I ruined all those things. Not only the spirometer, but his graphs.
Now, as a trumpet player, studying with a tuba player, how was that? You know, in the early, that first summer of lessons, and was that what was that like?
Well, first of all, it made absolutely no difference. His teaching for me was a musical approach using efficient body breathing and blowing. So I don't know why the teaching would be any different from a tuba or a trumpet. Would be different for an oboe, for example. But he taught all the different instruments and plus voice.
Right.
He had
yeah.
voice students who went to him too.
Yeah, I remember sometimes, I think he even had a couple of Metropolitan Opera singers show up at his studio.
Could very well have, but he had students flying in from Japan and from Europe and all around.
That's great.
And that's how well he was known in those days.
Yeah. Mr. Scarlett, I'm wondering, during your 40-year association with Mr. Jacobs, did you notice any change in his pedagogical approach, just the way he taught or talked about things, or did you notice anything?
Yes, there was a profound change, really. He, when I went to him, he was an authority on medical terms, authority on how the body is supposed to work, and he's in consultation with several doctors, including a breathing doctor from Mayo Clinic he did some research with him. I can't think of his name right now, but I always saw, in a downtime at a rehearsal or something, he'd be sitting there reading a medical book, and he had many of those. But in those days, he was, those medical terms and those medical ideas were very fresh in his mind, and he tried to give those to us as students, and of course we weren't medical students and had no knowledge of that type of thing, and many of those terms went sailing right over our heads.
Right.
We got the gist of what he talked and wanted to tell us. I mean, that was the important part. But it was very impressive, and he impressed us with all of his knowledge, but we were really looking for bare bones help on playing an instrument.
Right.
And so I think he sensed that after a while, and I noticed in his conversation and probably in his teaching, although I didn't go to him later on, but he didn't use those medical terms anywhere near as much. And it came down to, the two words, wind and song, and how simple playing really is. he mentioned that playing is really very simple. He said it's the teachers and students that make it complicated.
I remember there's a quote from Mr. Cichowicz that he's attributed to saying, "Playing the trumpet is easy. Getting out of the way is the hard part." Something like that. So
Yeah.
just getting your mind in the right place.
It is. It's I like to say in my own teaching, what do you do when you do something physically? If you raise your arm, do you think about all the parts of that arm that just raised your arm? No. But why do you do it when you play trumpet? And I can sometimes shake up a student by showing them how foolish it is to be thinking about all the different body parts that play trumpet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When raising your arm is such a simple process, but it's very complicated for the brain. But the brain takes care of all the details.
Yeah. Did you you mentioned having conversations with Mr. Jacobs backstage downstairs in the locker room? Any conversations with Mr. Cichowicz and Mr. Jacobs about teaching?
No, I don't think I ever talked with Vince about his teaching. His teaching's changed too, from what I could see.
Mm-hmm.
He had in the earlier years he used a lot of ideas of Jacobs and added his own to it, I'm sure. In the end, he had simplified his teaching a great deal, and did not challenge the students quite as much in this, and some of them may have expressed that, but Vince certainly had a marvelous reputation.
Yeah, that's true, and I know that from what I remember about him and what I've read since his passing, that he also came from a teacher who was tight gut.
Oh yeah,
method as well. So
no, same teacher.
yeah, yeah. What was it like when you got into the Chicago Symphony to be there? You are.
Well, in a small way, I felt out of place with these great artists who were sitting there, and I just wanted to do every last thing I could to deserve to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And I took my job seriously, in other words, and did practicing and studying and learning what I could. So any tidbits that I picked up from Jake along the way, I got put to use too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there you are, sitting with two of your teachers when you were in college with Mr. Herseth and Mr. Jacobs,
Mm-hmm.
And now you're part of the gang. So
yeah, and they were both close friends for my whole career, and my association there was much appreciated. Tell you one story about Jake, and how much he wanted to impress on the students that you've got to think good. What's going on in that mind. You hear that perfect trumpet player in your head, and then just copy that and let it come out the bell.
yeah.
And that's the wind and song again. Well, one Saturday night concert, Jake missed a note. It was very rare occurrence, and we were all startled. It just didn't happen. In fact, that's the only one I can ever remember quite like that. And after the concert, we were all going downstairs to the locker room, and as I passed by him and at his locker, his one fist was going into the other. Why didn't I think that note harder?
This was Jake.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, he was really upset.
Wow. That's funny. Do you remember did he have any particular rituals or habits, pre-concert, warm-up, or anything that you remember from him that was interesting?
No, he did say that if you want your brain to be working the best for the concert, hone in on it 3 hours before. In other words, practice the same things with good thinking thoughts, good creative thoughts, 3 hours before the concert, and then it becomes easier at the concert.
to start to collect your thoughts
Yeah.
ahead of time.
Yeah. Well, I remember Herseth, he would practice late afternoon on a Thursday night before a concert, and they really had the same idea.
And he would be at the hall doing that, or would
No,
he
he'd do it
be
at home.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. When you're at the hall with Mr. Herseth, you all would get to the hall and warm up and that sort of thing. What was that like with you and Mr. Herseth?
Well, we were all different. Some arrived early, some arrived late. In our trumpet section, Bud and I were usually the first ones there, half an hour to 45 minutes early, and we'd get accustomed to the temperature if it was cold outside or whatever, and wanted to have a leisurely warm up and feel good. But I was there 33 years, and every time he picked that horn up out of that case, that first note was good enough for the concert. In other words, his creative mind was turned on before he played the first note, even for warm up. And it had that good quality, whatever it was, of the way he wanted good music to be from the first note of the day.
I remember Jacobs would often talk about the term warm up, and I know in my own case when I first came to see him, for me the warm up was a period of time where I allowed myself to sound bad while I was warming up, and he said no, you want to always go for the great sound, even the very first sound of the day.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like this is what Mr. Herseth was doing.
There's no doubt about that. The most important part of the warm-up is turning your head on, because that determines what comes out the bell right from the first note, as Herseth showed us.
Mm-hmm.
Warm-up is not a physical thing. It's not getting a lip that I wonder what's going to happen today. No, it's the brain saying that this is the way I want to sound, and this is the way I'm going to sound right now. And that's just the way our minds and bodies work. We don't prepare or lift our left arm by thinking of all the muscles. It's the same on trumpet or any other instrument.
Did you ever, just in the moment during your years there, just stop and think between Jacobs and Herseth, just how symbiotic those two strong musical personalities, and just in this whole thought to lip process, how strong both of them were, how unusual that was?
Yes, unusual, but we had, between the two of them, there were a lot of team players.
Yeah, of course.
Team players
Yeah.
who were trying to copy them and really fit in. And that was a very, very strong part of our brass section.
Yeah.
Team players.
Well, I think it's pretty fair to say that if you go back and you examine recordings from the 1950s, the 1960s, and 1970s, there was no brass section anywhere that was close to what you all were doing.
Well, that's what some people say. We don't know. We just think if we had a good section, that's all.
Did you guys ever talk about how you were going to play things, or did you just listen and kept it to a minimum?
In our section, Bud was the leader, and we followed. He wanted us to follow in every part of playing, whether it was the tone, the articulation, obviously the tuning. All of those things were important to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he made a comment. He almost never made a comment about other players in our section. But there was one who came along who wasn't tonguing quite the way Bud wanted, and soon enough.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He gave everybody a chance to fit in. But one day he just kind of spilled over to me and wished that player would follow the articulations better.
Mm-hmm.
And it came along. Just took a little longer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's when you think of Mr. Herseth and Mr. Jacobs, you're thinking about the bookends, but there's so many of everybody else that's in the middle that's making that Chicago brass sound what it became.
It was very exciting. There were times where you finish a concert, you put the instrument down, and you just think, I have just experienced something really special. and that happened many times.
Any maybe many highlights that you can recall on tours, Carnegie, or in orchestra hall, or overseas? Anything that was extraordinarily extra special?
Well, I want to make one comment about Schulte. Schulte was an inspiring conductor, and inspiring because he studied the scores extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time we were going to play the Mahler Fifth again in September, and he came back from London, and we'd already played it 500 times,
Right.
And he said, "Oh, I was studying that score again, and I found something I hadn't seen before." So he wanted to incorporate that.
Wow.
And what he was doing, and I discussed this with Bud one time. What Schulte was doing, he would study the score to see what the composer wanted. He would build the emotion according to what the composer had in there. In other words, it might be nice and soft and build up and then you blow the lid off at the end or something, but the emotional level that was planned out by the composer, Schulte wanted to copy.
Mm-hmm.
And Bud and I both agreed that this studying gave him the insight into the composer, so that the emotion would build and build and build, and the audiences sensed that.
Right.
It wasn't that you go from one climax to the next climax. No, there was a certain building in there,
Mm-hmm.
and Schulte observed that, and it was, in my opinion, that's why audiences loved his conducting so much.
Yeah. Some conductor that didn't last nearly as long as Schulte, but certainly the recordings from that era with Martinon are very exciting. What do you remember about that?
Martineau, I came in the orchestra under Martineau, and he had his good points and some weaker points, but he was very good at modern music. We did a Rite of Spring in New York, which was fantastic. He was not quite as close to the early masters.
Yeah.
And we do a Schumann or whatever, and it just did not have the same satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
But he had his good points.
Yeah, there's a Miraculous Mandarin that comes to mind. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
And the Nielsen 4
Mm-hmm.
is legendary amongst low brass players. Anyway, I don't know what it's like for trumpet players, but it's got some really significant low brass parts that are very exciting. And that's to my mind, that particular recording is the gold standard of that piece,
Mm-hmm.
the Nielsen 4.
Yeah, but I haven't thought of that for a long time.
It's
It's been a while.
yeah. Mr. Scarlett, it's been just a great treat to come in and talk to you and just get your firsthand recollections and thoughts about Mr. Jacobs and Mr. Herseth. And before we go, I'm wondering, with the recent passing of Mr. Kleinhammer and of course Mr. Crisafulli passed away in 1998, do you have any memories of those fellows?
Well, let's see. Vince died. We better wait.
Okay.
She got it upstairs. All right, Vince died. Vince was a dear friend. I mean, we sat next together for who knows how many years, and I went to the memorial service, and they passed out the order of the service and so on. And here was a trumpet section on the front cover, including me, and. I looked at it that a minute and I thought, boy, that's the first memorial service I've ever been to where my picture was on the front cover.
Oh no.
But Vince would have enjoyed that. He had a funny streak, and it did not show up in his memorial service. It was so somber, and all Mr. Cichowicz and all that. Boy, I knew Vince as a fun colleague. We had fun. For example, we'd be playing some modern music, and you get into that modern music, and sometimes you can get hopelessly lost even in a Chicago Symphony,
Yeah.
you can't figure out what on earth they're doing, especially if somebody was up in the front who really was not the least bit clear.
Yeah.
Well, every time we'd sit there in the section and one of us was, where are we? Vince, I always had an answer. 78. No matter what the piece was, no matter where we were, he always knew we were at 78.
That was his standard answer. That's funny. That's funny.
That was fun.
That's very funny.
Kleinhammer, oh dear friend. My first year in Yorkshire, we lived about a mile apart, so we would share rides and share golf games, and just, you know, he was a very down-to-earth guy. Like, he made his own house, he built his own house, and then when he retired, he built another one in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And I heard the other day it was a log cabin, but I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. I heard the same story that he built that one also.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
Well, anyway, he always, the two of us, you know, he was third trombone, I was third and assistant trumpet. But being the third parts, he always referred to the two of us as tail gunners.
Okay.
From the Second World War, you know, when
Yeah.
they had the bombers with a tail gunner.
Yeah.
And so us third players were tail gunners.
Mm-hmm. I think Mr. Jacobs sometimes referred to himself as a tail gunner, also, just being on the bottom.
Yeah. And Jake always said that it was he went deaf in one ear because we had with that trombone bell right by his ear.
Well, what a team those two were.
Oh, marvelous!
That
marvelous.
was a legendary.
So musical and so cohesive. You know, they were just smacked together like paper on the wall.
Yeah.
Great colleagues. I enjoy every one of my colleagues. You know, I appreciate every one.
Yeah.
And they're one by one they're leaving us, and
Yeah.
I get my turn someday too.
Well, you're here now, and we're, as I said, so happy that you would allow us to come in and.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's in a way it's sad that the legacy of Arnold Jacobs is not as strong as it used to be, and anything that we can all do to enhance that is certainly well worth it.
Yeah, and that's the thrust of this whole project, is just to add to the voice, the chorus.
Yeah.
Just to keep
Yeah.
that chorus going.
It's not that strong in Chicago anymore.
Right.
It's just kind of sad, but there are a few who are teaching that. But we all do our part.
Exactly. Well, Puddles is not here. He's out on the lake. So, but he asked me to give you a match set of University of Oregon Ducks shopping bags
Well, we'll use them.
for your shopping pleasure.
We are conservative from way back, so that will be you save on the bags and the plastics.
There you go. There you go. And Mr. Scarlett, before we started taping, was saying, "Well, don't you have anything from Northwestern?" Because we're both Northwestern graduates, and sadly, I don't have anything from Northwestern to give you. But I do offer these University of Oregon bags with my thanks.
My pleasure.
It's great to see you. Yeah. And now back to you.
Now this is the original antique that Jake had. It was probably old when he got it,
Oh.
but it's got I don't even at this point I don't remember which one to blow in and not.
Right.
But anyway, this is the outer cylinder that held the water.
Oh, okay.
This is the inner cylinder that when you blow air into the tube here, the air goes underneath here, and this thing just keeps rising, depending on how much air goes in.
And then it records
It
it
records
on
on
the
this graph over here. Now when he told me that it was broken, it's still broken. Nobody knows how to fix it.
Oh, wow.
Until we get some mechanical wizard that comes along.
So my first lesson or two, probably my first lesson in '81. He tested me and
On this.
was it this one? I mean,
It's the only one I know that he had.
I mean, this looks very familiar, but I don't know when it
It's
was
the only one he
broken.
had.
Oh, well, this was it then.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's exciting.
When he died, his studio was full of stuff, and his son Dallas was the one who wanted to take care of empty the studio really. So Dallas came and he was in Florida, I think, came and got things that he wanted out of there himself, and when he left, he said, anything that's left is you can have.
Hmm.
And this was left.
Okay.
So
great.
that's how I acquired it.
Thanks for showing it.
Yeah.
That's great.
But it hasn't been used in years, and I don't know. When you have another one that's so little and easy to
Yeah.
fix, why bother with
I
this?
mean, you can't really take that around so easily. Wow.
But it is interesting. It does bring back memories, and that's.
And this is the one that
this
you
is the one that I wrecked.
Yeah.
You had to recalibrate the whole thing everywhere, and there's a little tube where you can see the water level, and you had to put the pen in there someplace, or a pencil, whatever it was.
This is a Collins respirometer. Collins respirometer. How about that?
The only one I've ever seen,
Yeah,
but it sure has a good story to go with it.
it does. Thanks again for sharing it.
You're welcome. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
I'm just the talent. He's the brains behind the operation.
I got that on camera.
That's right. Proof.